Hey team, it's Riley here and Matthew back for episode number 2 this fine Wednesday afternoon, evening for some of you, including Matthew.
It's all right, man. It's a good little switch up to do the podcast in the evening one.
Yeah, man.
So I like to switch it up.
It's always a pleasure to do it with you.
Yeah, this is cool, and we got a good topic too. So I'm glad you held that for me.
Yeah, yeah, yep. We're going to talk about quite a few things today. The title of the episode is "When is it best to just walk away?" That's a big piece of today's episode, but it's really just a piece. In all honesty, it was my attempt at making a clickbait-like title without being too clickbaitish. Hello, Andrew and Bobby. Thanks for joining, guys. So, I'm looking forward to it. Today, we're going to talk about lessons learned from 2, not just 1, but 2 viral videos from this past week. Some really, really critical lessons that apply to all of us as concealed carriers, as gun carriers, as self-defense minded folk. So, now I'm yawning. I don't know why.
Don't start that.
Hello, Jason. How are you all doing today? I'm doing great. Apparently, I need a nap. Maybe I'm starting to catch up with Matthew. It's getting close to his bedtime.
Yeah. They got to tuck me in and stuff. Get my Alka-Seltzer and all that.
Yeah. Let's see. So, hey, Bob, thanks for joining as well. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you being here with us today. So, I think let's get this thing going. Sound good?
Awesome.
All right. In 3, that was 2. 3, 2, 1. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode number 480. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network. I am your host, Riley Bowman, and I'm joined today by His Majesty, Matthew Maruster.
What's up, man?
Hey, buddy. Yeah, I mean, you got such a fine beard going again. You know, it's royal. It's so royally awesome.
Yeah, it comes and goes. You know what I mean? Like I only can keep it for so long before, I use up all those credits that allow me to keep it, and then I gotta shave it. So
yeah, I feel you. Yeah, super excited to be back with you for another episode. We're recording this on Wednesday, February 10th. Earlier today, Jacob and I did a episode about industry news in a couple of gear reviews. We do that episode, or at least that format of an episode once per month. This afternoon, we're really excited to talk with you about 2 viral videos, 2 videos that went really quite widespread in the last week, that both have some really important lessons to take away from them, especially the title of the episode is "When is it best to just walk away?" And that is a really important question to ask. Like, it's really important. I mean, going back to the episode I did last week or so with Matt Little, talking about like knowing in advance, like deciding now and understanding the math involved in a self-defense situation, right? Like making some of those decisions ahead of time and being in the right place mentally and emotionally is really, really important. And that's going to become really evident in today's episode. First, today's episode, though, is brought to you by the 2021 Guardian Conference. Talking about it quite a bit these days because it is actually quite consuming for me personally as we plan for this big event. We're anticipating a good number of you guys, okay? And that's important because we have an all-star lineup of instructors for this event, taking place in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, September 17th to the 19th later this year. And just highlighting some of the instructors we have coming to that event. We've got Larry Vickers, Spencer Keepers. Oh, look, there's me. Matthew will be there too, by the way. Matt Little, Brian Eastridge, Steve Moses, Chuck Haggard, Sam Middlebrook, Brian McLaughlin, Haney McMood, Andrew Branca, Todd Fossey, who just confirmed yesterday that he's good to go, providing some hand-to-hand and combatives training. A lot of great faces and names here, guys that really know their stuff. Andrew Branca, of course, for providing some legal instruction for our attendees. It's going to be really good. And that'll be also really relevant to some of the discussion that we have today in this episode. You and me, Matthew. Chuck Haggard is going to be there doing some great training. Haven't nailed down exactly all the courses and course schedule related stuff, but just give you an idea. Chuck is an expert in, well, first he's a cop for a long time, so he understands, cop stuff, but specifically he's an expert in areas like OC spray. All right. So we might even have an OC spray class going on at the Guardian conference. If you've ever wanted to take one of those, even get certified in OC spray. Managing unknown contacts, another great kind of seminar that I've heard Chuck put on. Low light tactics and techniques, another thing that Chuck is really, really experienced in and is known for. So be great. Matt Little's going to be there. Awesome guy. Special Forces. He's been on the podcast. You guys should recognize his name by this point. Also, retired SWAT operator, right? And a top level competitive shooter. Awesome dude. Spencer Keepers. I actually just talking with Spencer the other day. He's going to do an appendix specific class. So appendix carry. So that'll be great. And also we're probably going to get him to he has like a seminar presentation he does on holster design and selection and kind of like what goes into the makings of a quality holster, what to look for and that kind of thing. Of course, he's known for making a really high quality holster from his company Keepers Concealment, but he does that presentation in a great way. That's, yes, I mean, you're going to probably want to buy a Keepers Concealment holster by the time you're done listening, but it's not meant to be just an advertisement. It's meant to be really sound knowledge about holsters. And Larry Vickers, everybody probably knows Larry Vickers' name. Steve Moses, maybe a name you don't know as well, but is a fantastic instructor. Guys, I'm telling you, you're going to want to be at the first annual concealedcarry.com Guardian Conference presented by CCW Safe. All right. We're so proud to have them on board as our partners in this event. So it's going to be awesome. And you see right here, here's the dates, here's the times. And guys, right now we're still in that early bird price phase, actually technically super early bird. So get your tickets now. All right. They are selling. There's no guarantee of how long these are going to be available. Okay. So, and no guarantee as to when we're going to raise the price and go to the standard price. Okay. So a heads up on that. All right. All right. And then also today's episode brought to you by Guardian Nation, because Guardian Nation is our special membership program that is what's the word? It is inseparable from the Guardian Conference, meaning that this whole idea was born out of the idea that we wanted to do an event, a training event specifically for our Guardian Nation members, but we decided we'd make it open to more than just members. Members would get a huge discount on it, which you do. And also it's actually kind of to the point where most people signing up, you're going to want to just be a Guardian Nation member anyway, because you're going to save more in paying for the Guardian Conference by being a member than you're going to probably actually pay, at least initially becoming a member. So guys, check out guardiannation.com, learn more today, get signed up, and go make sure you check out the Guardian Conference and get signed up for that event. We hope that you can make it. We have people traveling in from all across the country. You're going to want to do so as well. I'll tell you this other thing. There's some great advantages of this being in Oklahoma City, Matthew. For one, it's pretty easy to travel and get to because it's centrally located in the country. Flights there are generally pretty reasonably priced. Also, hotel expenditures and things. We've got a couple of group rates with hotels there very close to the range. very, very, very affordable. We really put a lot of thought and effort into making this a fantastic event that's as affordable as we can possibly make it for all of you guys. So seriously, take us up on it, and we hope to see you there. Let's get into today's topic. All right. First, we're going to talk about a fatal shooting of a man in Montgomery County, Maryland. Excuse me, not Virginia. And this happened just a few days ago. All right, it's been getting a lot of press, and rightfully so, because it's quite telling. It's an impactful video to watch. Matthew and I were just reviewing it again together a few minutes ago. And I'll give you kind of the background, the story of what took place. You have this man, this guy here. And so I'm showing video for those of you that are listening only. I apologize, you won't be able to see, but I'll just describe as best I can. You have a man who, interestingly enough, is a retired security IT professional of some kind. He's actually done work for like the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and like other government agencies. Like, this is incredibly out of character for him, as far as we can tell, because I actually went to his LinkedIn profile, shared with me from another person, a friend, actually Rich Brown over at the American Warrior Society and the American Warrior Show. And I went and took a look at this guy's LinkedIn. This dude was, as far as we can tell, just looking at a LinkedIn profile, a good, decent person that was a very highly qualified professional person that just retired a few years ago. All right. He has like hundreds of recommendations from coworkers and clients and people he's worked with over the years. So this seems to be very much out of character for him. What went down this morning on this particular day? Well, he gets into an accident with a vehicle, runs into another vehicle. So it's like a multi-vehicle accident, and crashes his own car, gets out of his car, and apparently he's brought some kind of stick with him, or he's found it on the ground or whatever. And he actually starts trying to attack the occupants of the vehicles that he just got in an accident with. About this, time or shortly after, a Montgomery County sheriff's deputy shows up on scene. He was just going into work to start his shift for the day. He interacts with this man. Apparently, he recognizes that he's irate, that he's non-responsive to his commands. He tells him to put down, show his hands, put down the stick, the weapon, whatever. Apparently also attempted to try to tase him, although we don't see video evidence of that here, but that was in the written reports. And nothing's working. This guy is now walking towards him in a threatening manner, very much posturing and swing. And then here you'll see he actually swings and breaks the stick on the officer's head or arm or something, swings again. And then the officer opens fire from a relatively close distance of 1 to 3 yards. All right. So there's the video for you. All right. So just kind of wanted to break this down very briefly. I know I should have given you guys a heads up. This is graphic, obviously. The full video goes longer than this and is more graphic. You don't need to go see that. We see everything we need to see right here in this video. The reason why we're talking about this today is a couple of things. I've seen a lot of comments from people observing this, and an initial takeaway is, wow, this officer fired 12 shots at this man. 12 shots, right? So I've seen comments in recent days like, oh, wow, can you imagine if the anti-gunners are able to get mag capacity limits passed of 10 rounds or even less? I know they're actually wanting to go even more aggressively than just 10 rounds in some of the proposed legislation that may be coming. I would have been, if this was me in a situation, I only had 6 rounds or 10 rounds even, I might not have been able to successfully defend myself from this attack. Okay. That's a reasonable takeaway from this. Some people looked at it and, made comments to the effect of, well, it's a stopping power issue. This guy must have been shooting a 9mm, and maybe if it had been a 40 or a 45, it might have been different. Well, at this point, I kind of actually want to hand it off to you for some of your comments, Matthew. Like, what is your take on all of that? what I've presented so far.
Yeah, I mean, the ballistics angle is something definitely to talk about, and I think backing up, this is a deputy, right? A law enforcement officer is engaged, and so as a everyday carrier, right, defensive shooter, you probably wouldn't have to engage with this person, right? Like, so there is a little bit of a difference when we're talking about a law enforcement officer who's kind of there and they have to do something, right? So I think when I looked initially, and probably I don't know if you did the same thing, when I first looked at this this deputy. And this, let me preface this by, I'm not armchair quarterbacking, neither is Riley. I think it's important that we take as much as we can knowledge from the facts of the video, not speculation or not anything conjecture. But I'm looking at the deputy and I'm saying he didn't appear to have any other options besides the firearm, even if those options would have been preferable. As far as hand-to-hand skills, the issue is if you don't have any other skills to go to or any other tools, options, you don't have to be, Bruce Lee to have some sort of defensive ability. And that doesn't allow you to do anything except go to the gun. So once the gun comes out, it's pretty much inevitable what's going to happen here, because there are really no other options. So I think that was important. We could talk about tactically some things, but to your point, as far as stopping power and ballistics, we don't know what the caliber of the round was fired. People are speculating, hey, I bet you it's a 9mm, I bet you it's this. Okay, like until we find out, we don't know, and really it's irrelevant. It really is irrelevant. And like we were talking before, the shot placement, and we say it all the time, is far more important than the caliber. If you guys listen to our episode last week, I think we talked about justified shooting, where a guy shot a 22 long rifle Ruger SR22 into one shot into somebody's chest and to stop him. And that person died. Mm-hmm. So, crazy things happen. Tim Grammons, you talked to him, Riley, and did an awesome interview, but he shot 45 rounds or 45 caliber. And how many rounds did he fire? Like,
I think he hit the suspect 13 times before
so,
achieving a stoppage of that person.
So yeah, we can look at generalities, how ballistics perform, but ultimately it boils down to, are you getting successful hits in areas that are going to impact this person's attack?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah. I want to highlight a couple other things. First of all, as you said, this is not intended to be armchair quarterbacking, this deputy and his actions and so forth. But there are lessons to be learned for sure. And I want to highlight a couple of things here. First of all, as this man starts raising this stick over his head to strike the deputy gets an arm up. All right, that's good. He raises his arm up. He's taking defensive position, getting his arm up and protecting things that are more vital, his head and his neck and so forth. Right. So that's good. I want to point out how close we see that he is to this man. It's pretty close at this point. He's certainly within striking distance. Now it looks, in the perspective and everything, is probably a little bit deceiving. It might look like they're arm's length away, but if you notice that the man, as he's swinging the stick, he's full on swinging. He's leaning into it. So his arms are fully extended at this point, and the stick hits that deputy like in the side of the head or kind of shoulder area or somewhere around there. So the reality is they're probably separated by probably about 6 or 7 feet, if I was going to venture a guess. So it may look like it's 3 feet, but it's probably more like 6 or 7 feet. Now, that's still both very, very close distances and too close for comfort, right? So I want you to kind of pay attention that as the deputy is walking back, he did a little bit of a hop and a step there. which is a little bit faster tempo, but then he kind of goes back to this more leisurely backpedaling motion. You know what? Particularly looking at this from a civilian context, let's actually put some space between us and our attacker if we can, right? Rather than just allowing them to maintain this relatively close distance, if we can, let's increase the tempo of our speed trying to get away from them. Consider also too, instead of just walking straight rearward in a straight line, actually going in at an oblique angle, like actually going, trying to increase distance, but also changing the angle, actually leading that person, or trying to go to the side, right? Moving laterally a little bit more. Now, that's not necessarily by itself going to solve this situation, but if you can imagine that instead of just raising an arm as the suspect was about to strike this deputy, he could have raised an arm, but also have sidestepped very quickly, very, rapidly. And that might have actually caused him to move completely offline and not get struck at all. And it forces your adversary to, now they have to reorient themselves to you because you just now change the angle on them. So give that some thought and some consideration as well. So we want to try to increase distance even more rapidly than what this officer is doing at this time, but also consider changing the angle and moving laterally. A question from Dave on YouTube. He says, did all 12 rounds fired hit? We don't know the full answer to that question, but I surmise that there were some misses here. Let me clarify misses. I think there's a high probability there were some rounds fired here that completely missed the target. All right. I also surmise that many of these rounds, especially these initial rounds, were what we would call peripheral hits. Okay. It's hard to see perhaps for some of you that are viewing with me right now on our live feed, but as I've watched this again and again and again, when this officer fires his first few shots, it's actually kind of left and right, and like his gun, the movement of his gun is all over the place. All right. The first shot looks to me like a little bit left, and the gun dips low and to the right, and then it kind of comes back over to the left. And later on in the video, you see the angle of the muzzle is kind of all over the place. All right. Now we might be led to think that, well, if we're generally hitting all in the chest region, like it's gotta work at some point, right? Yeah, but realize that once we get really below the rib cage, nothing down there is going to result in an immediate incapacitation. In some of these rounds, and I can tell you if you've seen the full video of this, where you see the man on the ground and you see where some of the blood finally starts to come from, there's a number of these hits that are quite low on the body. Okay, so by that we mean in the belly region or the lower abdomen even, and those just aren't going to get the job done. Also, peripheral hits on the chest, on the chest, your rib cage, right? Not going to get it done either. We need things to be center line, high thoracic cavity. All right, that's where we need it to be. Or here's the other thing. What about taking a headshot after you fired some number of shots and something's not working? Could it mean that we now need to change up our approach and go for a more sure shot? Yes, it's higher risk. Okay. And I had this conversation with somebody recently, and they're like, well, try doing a headshot on a moving target. Even though he's close, like that's a really difficult shot. Here's the one thing, though. The advantage that the cop has in moving in a straight line to the rear relative to his position, this person coming at him, his head is more or less staying, it's not moving a lot side to side, more than likely. And we're talking a distance of like maybe 2 yards. I don't know about you, but I know I can make a headshot at 2 yards. And I don't mean to make this sound so trivial that nothing's a sure thing. I get that. But that's the point of training. Like, we practice this kind of stuff because it is relevant at times, right? I made the comment to someone, and I told Matthew the same thing earlier. I said, this is like the perfect case for like a Scott Jedlinski Modern Samurai Project 3 and 2 drill. And that drill is you draw and put 3 rounds into the high center chest, and then you transition and put 2 rounds into the head of the target. And on Scott's target, he uses his own target, but it's basically a body A zone. And for the head, it's a 3x5 card is the target he uses for the head. And the standard is to do the 3 rounds into the body and 2 into the head from the draw in 2 seconds or less. That's the standard. That's a very spicy standard, by the way, but it's doable. Okay. This is why we train. The point is I want my shooting skill and ability to happen subconsciously, right? So that my brain is thinking, and I'm thinking tactically about the situation. But when it comes time to use that gun, the use of the gun should be subconscious. And at this distance, especially after a few shots where we're not getting the desired result, meaning stopping the threat, it's definitely worth asking the question, should we be considering taking a shot at the head? I would say yes. All right. This is a perfect case for that. All right. Secondly, the shooting in this case was, I believe, quite abysmal. Again, I don't mean to judge this guy too harshly, but he's sort of shooting from a pseudo retention position, one-handed. So he's not really in a true retention position where we can gain the advantage of a little, stabilization from pressing our hand and arm and maybe even the butt of the gun into our ribs and the side of our chest, right? Like shooting from retention position, that's what we want to do. We want to anchor the gun into our body so we aren't just out there flopping around one-handed, just shooting willy-nilly, which is basically what happened in this case. This guy, again, I've watched this multiple times, and I see the gun kind of go one way and another way and another way. It's all quite unpredictable. There was not a lot of marksmanship being employed. Secondly, he already has the gun slightly extended in front of him. You might as well have 2 guns on that gun at that point. All right. You're going to be more effective. Okay. So those are kind of some of the more specific lessons I would highlight, but the big thing here today, why we wanted to highlight this in the episode today was, and Matthew covered it, was that this is less of a ballistics question. This is less of a stopping power, as it's sometimes referred to, which is a bogus description. But this is not a 9 versus 45 or 40 or whatever debate. This is if you can't put your rounds where you got to put them to affect a stop, then it doesn't matter what handgun round you use question. That's what this is about.
Yeah.
You got to put the rounds where it counts. If you can't do that, it doesn't matter what you're shooting or what you're carrying. And you're going to end up like this guy shooting probably 3 times the rounds you needed to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm. And so, I think it's really important to kind of go back and like remind everybody, even myself sometimes, is what's the real reason why we shoot high center chest. Like there's many reasons that we do it, but there's really I think the main reason or the most important is it stops the threat. We have the potential to stop the threat with the least amount of rounds and as quickly as possible. And that's what we need to do, right? Like this guy, we want to stop them not 12 rounds or 16 rounds or whatever. We want to shoot is the fewest amount of rounds, because all those other things are, well, what about a smaller moving target? Now the more rounds we fire, the higher probability we have to miss, the longer this attack goes on, the more rounds we have to fire in general. And everybody has a capacity limitation at one point or another. Like the deputy might have had extra magazines. You may not have extra magazines, but we all get to a certain point where our capacity is exhausted. So I think it doesn't matter about your caliber. It matters about putting well-aimed shots or well-placed shots, high center chest, and trying to evaluate and see, are these hits working? And hopefully, if you're targeting these areas, you're not going to have to fire 16 rounds at 4 or 12 rounds at 4 feet or 5 feet. It just puts you at such a higher degree of being injured. I mean, he had the gun kind of willy-nilly, like you said, kind of holding it out, kind of going back and forth, pulling it in as the guy swung, and it's just getting out of the idea that when we shoot the gun, we're always marksmen, right? Like it's important that we're accurate, but we have to understand that I don't always have to have the gun out at full extension, right? I can bring that gun back and fire two-handed retention position, kind of just in a compressed position, right? But if you've never done that, your brain isn't going to immediately recognize that and go to that. You're going to have a gun out here and this hand just kind of waving at people, right? So I think it's just another example of, like, I think maybe not as good of training. This deputy may not have had the adequate training in a close quarters type, retention type incident. So I don't know. I can't really add much to what you said, but
I don't think there is much more to add. Frankly, I think those are all great points, and that is what it is, guys. This is why we practice. This is why we train. All right. The Guardian Conference. There's going to be some training at that event this year that would apply very directly to a situation like this, meaning the use of a gun in a more close quarter situation. Todd Fossey, that just came on board, he's going to be one of our instructors there. He specializes in teaching kind of the combination of the two worlds of fighting with our hands and fighting with the gun, all right, which often occurs in close quarters. And so, guys, come to the Guardian Conference. This is what it's for. Okay. Again, we could talk about, and by the way, in our next story or the next half of this episode, we're going to talk about conflict avoidance and that kind of stuff. But that's the ideal. But sometimes we may still find ourselves in situations where there is no other choice, and we got to use the gun to solve the problem. Well, in that instance, we want to be as effective as we can be in that moment, right? All right. Let's go now to Pennsylvania. The other viral story / video that told you we were going to talk about today, and this one probably went a little bit more widespread because it was quite, it's tragic, that's for sure. It's appalling in terms of the sheer level of violence that was. I mean, this was not just when a dude goes back for another gun and comes back to finish the job, you really know that he's gone off his rails, right? Like, pretty crazy story out of Pennsylvania, right? Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania specifically, not too far from Scranton. And I'm going to let Matthew kind of give us the overview of the situation as it played out. And the only reason we even know as much as we know about this is because, interestingly enough, the married couple that was involved had a surveillance camera with audio on the front of their house recording the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And so that video has gone wide and far in terms of its, being viral. And now we're not going to actually play back that video in this episode today. Chances are many of you have already seen it. If you haven't, I don't even know that you need to go see it. Okay. But due to its extreme level of violence, I just don't care to share it in today's video. And it's not, like some of these things we share and they're self-defense related, right? And to me, that's a little different than this one that's just outright brutal murder of two people. And then, of course, a follow-up suicide to all of that. So, Matthew, give us the rundown of this story between two neighbors, which was a married husband and wife arguing with the neighbor that lived across the street from them.
Yeah. So this is the overview. I believe it happened on the 1st of February. But basically, these neighbors live across the street from one another. Apparently, there had been arguments before in the past between these two. But on this day, the morning, I think it was like 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, something like that, 9 o'clock in the morning. So they're shoveling the snow on their driveway, pushing it across the street, and apparently throwing the snow or pushing the snow across the street onto the neighbor's property. In the video, you see both the neighbor comes out and he's shoveling. He has a shovel. The woman has a shovel, snow shovel, and the husband is out there. He doesn't have a snow shovel, but it's from the reports, they were shoveling the snow, throwing it out. He came out, was shoveling. He got mad, and they start arguing. Arguing is probably the understatement of what you'd hear if you listen to the audio. It's expletives. It's verbal threats of physical violence. There are derogatory terms used from both sides, from every single person involved. They're all cussing and just escalating this more and more. And you can see that this is, if it didn't go to a physical fight, I would have been surprised, because it was escalating. So at this point, the one neighbor that lives by himself, he goes into his home. And as the neighbor's in the home or in the garage, we can't really tell, but he goes in out of sight, out of view of the camera. And the argument is they're still screaming at one another. The gentleman and his wife are still shoveling snow. They're cursing at him. He's yelling from his house, cursing back at them, and more threats are made. So at this point, the husband and wife are standing basically in the middle of the street, and the neighbor comes out with a handgun, walks down his driveway, pointing the gun at the ready position at these two people that are standing in the street. Immediately, the woman comes from behind the man and kind of comes up and walks towards the neighbor with the firearm. And you hear, because the audio's there, what are you going to do? Then the husband says, put the gun down, put the gun down. The neighbor starts shoots off a series and number of rounds, not hitting either one of them. Eventually, and at this point, the husband and wife are frozen, whether they're frozen in fear or, Riley and I were talking earlier, that normalcy bias, that like your eyes are seeing something, but your brain is like, this isn't happening. I can't, this isn't really happening. I know I'm seeing it, but this isn't really happening, because he's shooting several rounds as he's closing the distance, and they stand there. Eventually, the husband gets hit. He runs off, and then the woman gets hit, and she drops right there in the street. The neighbor closes the distance, comes to maybe a foot, and puts a couple rounds in towards the woman's head or face area. One looks like it misses, but one definitely hits her. He walks then over across the street and shoots the husband at point blank range. You see the gun go into the slide is locked, so it's out of battery. He's out of ammunition. He walks back into his house. 40 seconds later, he comes out. The neighbors are still in the street where they are, and bleeding. Several neighbors during that 40-second period come over to try to, they try to help and trying to figure out, hey, are you okay? And the neighbor comes back out now with a long gun and walks up to the woman, fires several rounds at point blank range, and then walks over, shoots the husband at point blank range, and then goes back into his house. As police arrive, he shoots himself and kills himself. And so, it's a horrific, tragic event that happened. That's the overview. So I'll hand it back over to you, Riley, and you can start picking it apart. Yeah,
I appreciate you breaking that down. So couple of things I've seen discussed over the last week since this video came to light, and people have been viewing it and analyzing it and so forth. You mentioned how when the shooting first began, husband and wife kind of seemed to be more or less frozen. In fact, she even still was like kind of giving the dude a finger or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even as he's firing the first several shots, and there doesn't seem to be this immediate reaction to that. And keep in mind that they likely have already seen the gun in this man's hand. I mean, but he's very much in a like a classic isosceles stance, really pointing in on the husband at first. It couldn't be more obvious that this man has a gun. He's aiming it at you. Things are about to get really nasty, right? And so people have been like, so one thing I saw was that someone commented, I saw this comment more than once actually. Well, the video and the audio seems to be out of sync because the time, the reaction from when we hear the first few shots ring out to when we first see the man and woman start to react. Like, and I'll be honest, the first time I watched it too, I'm like, oh, is this out of sync? You know, like what's going on here? And then watched it again and again and realized, no, it's not out of sync. Because you'll see that when you see it in profile, meaning that he points the gun at this woman's head on the ground and fires a shot or two, you see that, like, it's very apparent. Nope, that was in sync with the audio. So, okay, we're synced up now. That's kind of my own analysis that I did at first. The first time I watched it was like, what's going on here? So then we have to go back and look, well, why did they not react in a rational way, at least what we think would be rational? When somebody starts shooting at you, you'd think you'd be scrambling, right? Well, as you touched on it, you talked about normalcy bias, which is a technical term. In fact, I'll just read to you the definition from Wikipedia because it's right here. Normalcy bias is a cognitive bias which leads people to disbelieve or minimize threat warnings. Consequently, individuals underestimate the likelihood of a disaster, when it might affect them, and its potential adverse effects. So what this is a situation where something is so far outside your norm that the brain tricks itself and just is like, no, this doesn't make sense. Like, this can't be happening. You know, people are familiar with that line of, like, you hear that phrase, what? This can't be happening to me. Me? Now? Really? That is normalcy bias, because it's something occurring to you or that you're witnessing that's so far outside the norm, it just doesn't compute. This is the classic freezing response that many people, you might refer to. In fact, Casey in the comments on YouTube here, used the phrase freezing. They froze in a way, and they may not have frozen in the way that you might have expected. As far as you might have expected them to see a little bit of a shrug or a shrinking, kind of body language of sorts. We don't really see that, but I have some other thoughts and some theories as to why they may have further reacted the way they did. Realize too, guys, that when we get so worked up emotionally, right? Have you ever been, in fact, I'm going to ask Matthew the question. Okay. Answer truthfully if you care to. All right. And I think, and actually I wouldn't be surprised either way because of the type of person you are. But have you ever been so mad that it affected your judgment of a situation?
Absolutely. I mean, it absolutely does. I mean, when we say like anger clouds your ability to reason, or something similar to that, it absolutely clouds your ability to see things how they really are and respond to them appropriately. And this is why you see sometimes officers use excessive force, because they end up getting emotionally angry at the person, and it carries them along past where they're able to realize what they're actually doing and how ridiculously dumb their actions are. And it absolutely does. And I think if we were honest, everybody has been there,
I agree. I've been that angry before as well. It's not a good thing. It never is. It never leads to anything positive. That's for sure. But we've all probably been there at some point somewhere in our lives. It might have been many years ago. Might have been as a child. It might have been more recent for some of you. But at some point, we've probably all gotten, and it doesn't have to be anger necessarily either. You just so emotionally worked up, because sadness can be the same way. Anxiety, right? Anger, frustration, all of that can cloud our ability to reason, okay, and to be rational about the situation that we are in. Okay, so when you watch the video, or if you listen to the audio, which is this video is not only graphic in terms of the violence that occurs, but also the language that's being used.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that is pleasant to listen to, and certainly not something we want our children listening to, or anybody under the age of 18. Frankly, sorry, I don't even want my older kids, listening to that kind of stuff. So it's apparent that on both sides, and especially because, think about it, realize that as this man is pointing a pistol at both this husband and wife, she is still so worked up that she's screaming obscenities at him and flipping him the bird. And this is like foaming at the mouth level of anger and frustration between these people. Okay. That's I'm trying to paint that picture of just how upset these people are. And you get to that level, it absolutely can and does impact your ability to be rational. So going back to the podcast episode I did with Matt Little, we talked about math, right? As it relates to use of force, that it should be there should be as little emotion as possible when it comes to us and the use of a gun, or engaging in a in a stressful situation. The way to maximize performance and to make the best decisions as it relates to the law, we want as little emotion involved as possible. We want to look at the situation for what it is and go, this is the course of action I should take based on good, sound tactics, based on the law, based on just common sense. And I think that the level of emotional, that heightened emotional state that these people were in, I think further enhanced the negative effect of normalcy bias. And I think that's why they reacted the way they did.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. And I wanted to add like an analogy, a sports analogy, right? Like people talk about trash talking, right? Like you're getting into the other player's head. Well, what is that doing? It's taking them off of focusing on what they need to do in an appropriate, maybe defensive position or whatever. And it's getting them to think about something emotionally, like, okay, I'm going to stop this guy because he disrespected me. And now then he gets a pass interference, right? Because he's too aggressive and he doesn't respond appropriately. So it's similar to that when you let your emotions, and we're not saying like be robots. We're just saying you can't allow your emotion. You can't get outside of your emotions. You can't get outside yourself and let your emotions control. You need to control your emotions. You can be a very strong, powerful person and very decisive, but that has to be under control, because if it's not, you're out of control and you're reckless.
Yeah. Yep. There you go. There you have it. Now let's break down some other things, lesson wise from this incident. First of all, avoiding confrontation or conflict avoidance. I think that's the first thing, first and foremost. Now, it's understandable how human beings how we get to a place of conflict. Okay, because it is a part of life, right? Many of us remember solving conflict on the playground, or schoolyard, during recess or whatever. Like, I've been in fights. You've probably been in fights. Actually, I know you've been in fights. Like, conflict's a part of life, right? So but the part of life is that we got to figure out is learning how to deal with conflict. And there's mild forms of conflict, right? Having a minor disagreement with somebody over a situation or an issue or whatever, like we could be debating the Second Amendment or upcoming legislation, and we could have a disagreement about certain things, right? Well, that's a mild form of conflict. So it doesn't mean that we should totally avoid all conflict, because some conflict is, when it's reasonable, is good. In fact, I think conflict and stuff leads to growth for individuals when we are able to positively manage it and learn from it. But what I'm talking about as far as avoiding confrontation in conflict, I'm talking about this kind of situation. And there's a point where we have to go, initially this might have started as, "Hey neighbor, why are you throwing snow on my property?" Like, while that may not make much sense to some of us, because like some of us would think that's not a big deal, but apparently it was to somebody, right? So then, well, what is it to you? Like, it's just snow, it's just gonna melt. Yeah, but I don't appreciate it because whatever reason I have, right? So this can start out very innocently, if you will, right? But at some point we have to go, you know what? This just isn't worth my time. All right. Or this isn't going anywhere. This is non-productive. And we need to recognize when that moment is and walk away from it. Well, what's your thoughts about that? Particularly, I mean, not only in this situation, this specific video, Matthew, but just in general, like, how do we recognize when we should walk away?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think it starts with understanding yourself and understanding that the way you see other people, they may be seeing you the same way, and so the way we carry ourselves, I think, is really important, because it helps us understand other people as well. If I think that I'm better than everybody around me, and I'm right, and I'm always right, and nobody's going to tell me differently, and I'm going to have the last word because, no one's going to disrespect me, then I have to, I almost inevitably am drawn into conflict, right? Because like, I have to be right. And so if we start understanding, like, hey, there's different people, there's different ideologies, there's different ways people see each other. I'm no different than you. You might be a total jerk, but I don't have to be that way. I can just say, you know what, I don't want to be involved in this, and I'll walk away. I think coming to the point in your life where you start to prioritize your life above having the last word. Like, you start thinking about, like, what is my benefit to my family? How am I carrying myself in front of my wife? My wife's standing out here. There's kids. Like, is this the way I want to present myself in front of my family? Because even if they didn't get shot, I mean, let's say they both go in their houses and slam the doors and that's it. It's still totally unacceptable behavior, right? And so I think we just have to start saying, like, I'm not going to do these things. I'm just not. I'm going to make the decision not to be a jerk, even if somebody's a jerk to me. And I kind of say that, and we cover this all the time on the podcast, but it's really important to me. Like, what is in your heart, what you think, is eventually going to manifest in your actions. And so, when I see comments on, posts like, they're going to leave in a body bag, or I'm not going to let this, I have the right to shoot it. Like, you may have the legal right, and maybe it's justifiable, but that's not if you have that drive, you're likely to use force when it's probably not necessary or excessive, or get yourself involved in situations that you didn't have to, because that you can see that thought manifest itself. And I just think, as concealed carriers, we have to look at ourselves and just say, no longer am I just going to be involved in a fist fight. Now I have a firearm. I'm bringing a firearm in every fight, every conversation that I'm going to be involved in. And that's a potential death for me or somebody else if I don't control the situation by being in control of myself.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Spot on. I would answer my own question with, how do I know when it's time to walk away, by using this as a guide and a metric? And what this is when you recognize that emotionally you are getting tied up in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because one thing to initiate or initially engage in some kind of conflict, right? Because again, those, and we don't necessarily always pick every fight. Sometimes people pick the fight with us, and so there's that initial conflict that has to take place while we're, figuring out, orienting, if you will, trying to figure out, okay, how do I respond to this, right? It's one thing to simply be, straightforward and direct and factual in your, kind of the fact-based approach, like, no, that's not how I see it. There's this to be considered, whatever. But at some point, when you recognize those emotions starting to well up inside of you, anger, frustration, that you start getting upset, like that should be the moment that you go, ooh, you know what? I'm not thinking very rationally right now because I'm emotionally invested in this conflict. That, I would say, let that be your guide when to walk away. When you recognize your emotional control going out the window. All right. Along with that, here's some other advice. Do not ever provoke. Period. It's almost nothing good that ever comes from provoking somebody. We have to look at why we provoke someone. And provoking is almost always tied to, it's almost like a calling of a bluff, right? It's like, oh yeah, what are you going to do? Right? That's a provocation. That's, oh really? Like, prove it. Let's see it. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what was going on here. There was some serious posturing going on between these neighbors. And then it became provoking and taunting. Right? And so what did it do? It pushed one of them over the edge to the point that his bluff was called out.
Yeah.
And so he went back in to his garage, into his house, whatever, comes out with a gun. Okay. You said, prove it. You said, let's do this. All right. I'm ready. I got mine right here. Where's yours? Right.
Well, and you're right. But for those that either didn't hear the audio portion of it, he comes out, and after the second time when he shoots the woman, he says, you should have kept and he swears, mouth shut. And like, for us, we're like, that there's no way that, we can or hopefully that you're listening to this and you're like, man, I could never get to the point where I could shoot somebody for disrespecting me or saying these things. Right. But to him, when in that mindset, that's he spoke truthfully right then and there. Like, that's why he got so angry that he was like, you should have kept your mouth shut. Now I'm going to shut it for you. He walked over and the other guy called him a derogatory term. And he said, oh, I'm a, and shot him again. So it was all like these verbal things that he felt like his ego and his pride was hurt. Right. Yep. And he was going to exert his force on them to show them, no, I'm not going to allow that to happen. And, I think we can push. I don't think this guy was on the brink, like every day of the week. Like, it was just brewing there. I don't think he was the next Columbine shooter or something like that. I think this just was a person who was going through a lot of things and probably not mentally able to navigate the issues he was going through. And this was the kind of the straw that was like, that's it. And he's just done. But I think a lot of people could get to that point. And to your point, like, we should not go out and seek conflict, because somebody may take you up on that offer, and it's not where you want to be.
Yep. All right. So avoid confrontation. Don't provoke, right? Keep your emotions in check. You got to stay emotionally in control. As soon as you lose control of those emotions, we got to check out. We got to get out. We got to withdraw. If we cannot withdraw, all right, because that's conceivable. That's certainly a possibility that we go, you know what? This isn't worth my time. I'm sorry I said that. I apologize if I hurt your feelings. You start apologizing, doing whatever you got to do. Try to de-escalate. All right. Another de-escalation techniques. Okay. But what if that doesn't work? Then we got to have a plan B. Now what's next? Let's say I can't get away. Let's say I'm in a confined space. Maybe there's nowhere to go. Maybe I'm surrounded. Maybe it's this guy's buddies now are surrounding me, right? You know, that kind of thing. Like, okay, we got to talk our way out of the situation. We're trying to do that, but that's not working. What's our plan B? All right. Well, it could be less lethal forms of force. It could be OC spray, for instance, right? It could be, hey, maybe things are going to get to we don't maybe know it yet, but do I have a plan B? Right? What is that plan B? And do I have one? Perhaps it is the gun, because maybe it does get to that point, right? Well, to be able to use a gun, you got to be carrying a gun. I've looked at this video, and I don't think either this man or this woman was armed.
No.
I would think at some point, you know, once you saw your neighbor pointing a gun at you, you would be probably moving to get your own gun out. At least I would. So you got to have your plan B. Here's the other thing I took away from this too, Matthew. If you are injured, but you're still alive, you're still breathing, don't assume the situation's over.
Mm-mm.
Right? They're on the ground, they're injured, perhaps seriously injured, perhaps dying, but not dead yet. You're just out in the open. You're laying in the street. There's also the danger of a car. I mean, it's snowy, it's slick. A car could run over you, not be able to stop in time. You know, like, get yourself out of there. All right. And if you can't get away, find cover or do your best to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Here's another thing. What if you can't get away? Do you think that man would have shot the woman again, particularly when he came back with the rifle, if she was laying on the ground motionless?
Yeah, because she was still cussing at him when he came up the second time, right?
Yep. She was moving. She was saying stuff, you know. And as he came back, she said something back to him or something, I think. Anyway, and yeah, the point is, like, do you think, I mean, it is no guarantee that if she played dead that he wouldn't have finished her off. But I'd say there's a good chance that because I think he came to finish him off because, you know what? I took it this far. I'm going to make sure they're done, and then I'm going to take myself out because my life's over at this point. I got pushed over the edge. I lost control. I recognize that now. I'm going to jail for the rest of my life. My life is over as I know it. I got nothing else to lose. I'm going to make sure they're dead, and then I'm going to be dead.
Mm-hmm.
If she was laying there dead, as far as he could tell, he might not have shot her, and she might have survived. I'm not saying it's ideal. I'm just saying it's a tactic. I don't know. Any thoughts about that? Any of that? The above?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, de-escalation is, who knows if, you know, and we're talking about this woman is physically incapable of moving, or you are, right? Like in this situation, it's the woman and she lays in the middle of the road. And it appears as though she wasn't physically, like, her mobility wasn't physically taken from her. Like, she was shot in the, you know, the pelvis and couldn't physically move because her hips were destroyed or something. It seems more the shock and maybe just, the pain and just like, I don't know what to do. And I'm stuck here. But if you are, I mean, and obviously in that situation where always the will to fight, the will to live has to be there. And we want to do what we can to, get out of there. But to your point, like, let's say you physically can't do it. Like you physically can't get up. Yeah, I mean, that's a technique. You potentially still try to de-escalate. If you have no other tools other than your brain at this point, you have to look at the situation and say, can I talk this guy down? Like, you plead with the guy. Maybe you appeal to something like that. We don't know if that would have changed anything. But certainly at one point now you realize it's only my brain because I can't get up. I have to start thinking, what can I do? Either do I play dead? I don't know. Do I try to de-escalate this further? I don't know. It's something you should at least have in the back of your mind of, so you don't get into a situation, you run that loop where, what should I do? I don't know. What should I do? I don't know. Like nothing interjects and says, okay, try this. It's better than nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just keep in mind that hey, I was just shot. Somebody just committed an act of violence against me. I can't assume it's over with if I'm laying there injured. So it's I talk about having a plan B. That's sort of your plan C and your plan D, and you just have to be thinking about this. Like, I'm trying to maximize my chances of surviving and prevailing in this incident today. So what are all the things I could be doing to help maximize my chances? How about this, Matthew? What about the witnesses / citizen responders that came, at least attempted to come to their aid? That was particularly interesting to me because, I mean, obviously they just heard noise. They just heard arguing. They just heard gunshots. They look out the window. They see a woman laying on the ground in the street. So they go out. They could have very likely have gotten injured themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, he started coming right out as they were right there. And I guess at least one of them, it seemed like saw them and was like, oh, let's get out of here sort of thing as he was coming back. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I noted that too. I thought it was really interesting. They came, and obviously at that point, they're not providing any immediate aid to the victims. They don't have any gear on them. They may not be trained or whatnot. But absolutely, somebody's been shot. We don't know who the shooter is, right? And so putting yourself out there, they didn't realize it was shot probably until they came out there and saw the blood and stuff. But when that guy came back out, he saw one of the people right next to the woman, and he raised the rifle up to the ready position, like kind of aiming in on him. And then that dude took off. So, we don't know if he would have been providing aid, to that woman. Who knows if that guy would have come out and shot him as well. That's something.
It's pretty apparent that he had nothing left to lose anymore at that point. So what does it matter to him?
Yeah. And so I think it should give us pause to say, okay, if somebody's injured, our instinct is to go and help them, but also don't lose track, especially like if it's a violent scene, right? That there could be a potential threat still there, and you're putting yourself at risk. So at least be aware of those things, right? Who knows?
That's right.
So,
yeah, if you're a witness or a responder, a first responder, I don't mean in the sense that you're EMS or police. I just mean like you're one of the people that arrives on the scene, okay, of something like this. Don't assume. And by the way, this is true of really any potentially life-threatening situation, even the scene of an accident, right? Don't assume the scene is safe. Okay. We need to evaluate the situation. We need to try to understand what's going on and whether the scene is safe. And also be careful getting involved in other people's problems. I'm not saying not to help and be a good neighbor and a good citizen. But if you do decide to get involved, You got to make sure as best you can the scene is safe, and then also have your own plan B. All right. If something changes about this situation, okay. Like, I see people on the ground shot. Where's the shooter? Who shot these people? Are they still around? All right. I'll try to render aid, but where is this person that did the shooting? Okay. I need to be thinking about getting out of there or potentially defending myself if I find myself in that situation. And that very nearly, to me, I agree, as I observed it, these other people could have been injured as well. That would have been unfortunate. Fortunately, no one else was hurt, and it ended, terribly, very sadly. And by the way, everyone obviously in this situation, if you didn't know already, everyone died. Okay, husband and wife died. They left behind a 15-year-old autistic son. And even that is a lesson in of itself. Again, talking about being involved in conflict, getting emotionally upset, emotionally invested in a argument or a conflict of some kind. We need to recognize that, and we need to be thinking about, what are my priorities? Arguing over snow and where I put it, or making sure that I'm there for my son, and also that I'm setting a good, honorable example for those people that I care for and that care about me, right? Like, that's the other thing. The actions of all three of these people, like, obviously there's the man that's the murderer, and I'm not trying to suggest that like he did a terrible thing, something that was unimaginable, and that these people probably couldn't have imagined themselves. Again, normalcy bias. I don't suspect this man that killed them had ever done anything like that before, as far as we know. Okay. So, but we look at both sides of this conflict, and the actions and the words of everyone involved was frankly dishonorable, right? It was not a good example. This is not how we as human beings should be to one another. Now, apparently there was a long-standing kind of almost like a feud between these two households. I don't know all the details. I haven't seen anything further reported on that, but there was a history here. Still, we need to be good human beings and be respectful towards other people. Because not only is I think that the right way to live, but it also helps avoid these kind of situations in the first place. It's a self-correcting solution to avoiding conflict, not provoking, de-escalating, all that, because we will not tend to get involved when we try to be good human beings.
Yeah, agreed, man. It really does come down to just the condition of your heart. I truly believe that.
Yeah. And not to say that good people can't get emotionally worked up.
No, not at all.
So it's just like, yes, you're absolutely correct. And we just, by golly, we gotta keep the emotion out of it. Mm-hmm. Right? At least the negative ones. Good emotions, good. Bad emotions just don't really lead to much productivity wise.
No.
All right. Well, we need to start wrapping it up. I hope that we did this some justice. I mean, I anticipated getting some messages from listeners, Matthew, if we didn't talk about this, that we would have some that would talk, that would want us to talk about it. Sure. I actually did get at least one or two personal messages from folks that listen to the podcast that asked about it. The lessons learned is what's the important part, not focusing on the violence that occurred here, not focusing on those things, but focusing on what we need to be focused on as law-abiding, decent, concealed carriers. Mm-hmm. Right. Today's episode, again, sponsored by the 2021 Guardian Conference. Again, there will be fantastic training at this event that I'd like to think would help prepare any one of you within the sound of my voice a little bit better for these kind of violent encounters, right? Get signed up, guardianconference.com. Guardian Nation members save big on the ticket for this event. So you might want to consider being a Guardian Nation member, guardiannation.com. Of course, there's many other great benefits, huge benefits even, of being a member of Guardian Nation, including saving on CCW Safe, right? That's a good thing to have, I think, having a great organization like CCW Safe, having your back from a legal representation standpoint. If you had to be involved in a deadly force encounter, they've got your back. I assure you of that. And we're proud to be partnered with them and for them to be sponsors of this podcast and also our title sponsor of the 2021 Guardian Conference. All right, Matthew, we need to do a giveaway. Guys, once a week we do a podcast giveaway. You sign up at concealedcarry.com/podcast prize. Every week, the giveaway resets. So make sure you go in and do that each week. This week, what are we giving away, Matthew?
We are giving away a Legal Boundaries by State book. And
Great.
I'll cue you guys in on next week. We have an SSP eyewear gift card for $50.
Sweet. $50 gift certificate or voucher to SSP eyewear. It gets you a long ways on SSP eyewear, actually. So that's a great prize. And I will just tease, we have other cool things coming. In fact, I think 2 weeks from now, we'll give away a palm pepper spray.
Absolutely, we are.
So, yeah, we were just talking about that a little bit ago. And so we're going to give away one of these. Okay, so Palm was kind enough to send us some palm pepper spray. And that little unit right there, this is great to have as a less lethal use of force option that might solve certain situations that a gun's not appropriate for. And you just need a little extra something, okay, to defend yourself. So palm pepper spray, that'll be in a couple weeks here. But next week, giving away a $50 gift. It's a $50 voucher to SSP Eyewear. Today's winner is going to get the Legal Boundaries by State book. And so we should draw that winner right now. Matthew, ready? Here's the
Yes, sir. The winner is Miss Ashley. You are the lucky winner.
Congratulations, Ashley. So Matthew will get in touch with you to make sure you get your copy of the Legal Boundaries by State book, 50 state summary of all the different state firearm laws. In fact, I'm going to be using mine or referencing mine in a couple weeks here. So, yep, it's good reference to have. All right. Well, we need to wrap it up and let you go. Guys, have a wonderful rest of your day, evenings, wherever you may be. Have a great rest of your week and a fantastic weekend. Be safe, okay? Be smart. Speaking of which, a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.